Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan, MS Pearce, Ukraine War News Update. First part thereof for the 29th of April 2025. I'm going to start with the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course. You can find them in the description to the video below. 1,060 personnel lost, about where we've seen it. 5 tanks, that is about a quarter of the daily average. No, it's not. It's about half the daily average. Sorry, my bad. Okay, that's so. I guess 14 troop-carrying AFVs. That's below the daily average. 42 artillery systems, double the daily average, but not as high as we have seen. 1 anti-aircraft warfare system and 140 vehicles and fuel tanks. A high number there, but actually we have seen some days that have been extraordinarily high in that category, up to and around 300 even. So I think this suggests a slight calming down along the front lines. I think Kursk is probably somewhat quieter than it was. That's leading to, and the Russians are, they have been doing some attacks, but probably only in a number of places, not right across the front line, as we have seen on previous occasions. We have some videos supporting different elements of what we talk about on a daily basis. This Crypto Wiki thread will start here. Russian soldiers' chances of being evacuated from the battlefield are now virtually non-existent in many parts of the front line. According to a Russian military doctor, the prevalence of Ukrainian drones, cluster shells and remote mining is blamed. The Visiting Doc Telegram channel describes how the work of evacuation groups in many frontline areas is no longer possible. Quote, "We have gradually come to the point that the story that used to be present in some areas has become a mass phenomenon. The work of evacuation groups on the front line has practically ceased. It is worth understanding that we are talking specifically about removal from the front line and not from the front line zone. And in some areas of the front, the terrain, the dominance of our drones in the sky and the competent actions of the leadership allow such groups to continue working." But why did this happen? 1. Weapons of destruction. The number of drones in the areas is off the charts. Hanging eyes make adjustments, in other words, reconnaissance drones. FPV drones are high precision and effective weapons of low cost and are in widespread use with the enemy. Cluster munitions affect a large area and are used everywhere. Remote mining has become widespread. Here, the rule of personal safety comes into play. If you cannot provide assistance without being under the direct influence of damaging factors, then simply do not provide assistance. This is justified by the fact that a wounded soldier is already a potential dead one, and a rescuer can perform tasks. The evacuation team has a low speed and is a priority group target, which, when working on the front line, ensures a high probability of destruction and low efficiency in today's realities. An exchange of 1 to 5 is not rational, and effective work is possible only on a delay from the line of contact for several kilometers, taking into account the means of destruction and the terrain. So essentially, drones and cluster munitions and artillery, these are completely prevalent and a massive threat to the evacuators. So you've got an injured person, right? And I've talked about this before, though sometimes since I've done so. To get that injured person out, let's say you need 2 people to go and lift them up with the stretcher. So these 2 people are going into the exact same zone of threat, where there are drones and artillery active. You've got reconnaissance drones. You are 2 people, so you're easier to spot than 1 person. You go along and you're hit, and then 1 injured person becomes 3 injured people, or dead people. And it's not an efficient use of people. So I guess the idea is, well, I'd rather leave that person out there to die than risk another 2 people going in. And then those 2 people can't be used for the combat duties that we need them to be used for. So there's a double whammy effect to it. It continues here. Increasingly, evacuation occurs on motorcycles or ATVs, so quads, with carts, and a standard 4-man team carrying a wounded person is several kilometers from the front, from the line of contact. Again, there are areas where they work, but the efficiency and risk ratio does not justify itself. So yeah, imagine what I've just said and then multiply that by 2, because actually, do you know what? It might be 4 people that are sent to evacuate that single wounded soldier. Interesting stuff. So there's some issues with Blue Sky. So I'm going to his Twitter account there. So the second major point he makes is distances and terrain. Distances for removal from the line of contact are measured in kilometers, and physically carrying a wounded person without getting hit is an extremely difficult task. That's often why you need more than 2 people to do it. In fact, if we go back to the original video that gives him the stimulus here, the original video is yet another video of Russians abandoning their wounded on the battlefield. Russian soldiers wheeling a wounded comrade on a stretcher, fling him aside to enhance their chances of exiting the area without becoming like him. And I showed you that video some time ago, back in August, I think it was. But anyway, speed, stealth, open terrain. The later the enemy detects us, the later he uses his weapons, the higher the chances of survival and completing the mission. There are many places where there are fields from tree line to tree line, an average distance of 1 to 1.5 kilometers, which makes unnoticed movement impossible. Imagine the speed of an evacuation group carrying the wounded, and it is impossible to quickly overcome them except by motorized equipment. Physical fitness leaves much to be desired due to the average age, body condition and depreciation of the reserves of today's average infantryman. And that's a pretty horrific video that I can't show you there. And dragging around 10 kilometers on a stretcher is a very tough test, even for trained and young fighters. Here various devices come to the rescue, such as evacuation carts, but here it is worth understanding they're not suitable for all types of terrain, and these devices are definitely not for work on the front line, but on a delay, and they also require training. The channel recommends that soldiers are trained to deal with the worst case scenario, and I hope that all your classes are held under this scenario, that if he is wounded, he will be left on his own, and all issues related to preserving his life and limbs will become purely his problem, and he will evacuate several kilometers by himself. Get injured, you're on your own, because it's too much of a risk to get you out of there. Wow. But you understand these issues. It's obviously suboptimal. Ideally, you want to be getting all of your wounded out. But if you got a wounded person, you send 4 people in, they get hit by a drone, so you now got another, let's say, 3 injured people, 1 escapes. So now we got 4 injured people. Let's send 8 people in there, then they get hit, and it's just like multiplies. It's like some exponential problem. And you can imagine that would just disincentivize either side from rescuing, from evacuating their injured soldiers. Now, and of course, it's even less of a point getting the dead soldiers, especially when those dead soldiers are, they're going to cost you in terms of compensation for the families and whatnot. So it's often the case where it's more beneficial for the units to list them as missing in action rather than actually dead. Okay, I've had to take an hour and a half off as Blue Sky went down. So let's continue here. Ukrainians, says Anton Gerashchenko, of the 1st Severia Tank Brigade and Border Guards conducted a unique operation to release 3 brothers in arms from Russian captivity using only drones. So this is perfectly relevant to what I was just talking about. It's as if I have put them in order. Right. Here we have an example where they have managed to, in this case, rescue rather than evacuate someone. But actually, the difference here is that they are able to do this without losing people. So at the most, they would lose drones here. This is where maybe unmanned ground vehicles come into their own, where they can drive up. The problem is, if you've got an injured person, you need someone else to lump them on to a UGV, but you can drive up with a UGV that has a stretcher loaded on it, put the person on the stretcher and then drive it back behind the contact line, and thereby you don't risk losing all these extra people. Anyway, during the operation, the drone operators separated the enemy. Sorry, what happened here? So 3 brothers in arms from Russian captivity was saved using only drones. During the operation, the drone operators separated the enemy from the captured soldiers, dropped munitions to force the Russians to retreat. And after that, the operators used the drone's illumination to lead the defenders to a safe place while the retreating Russians were eliminated. So you can go and watch that on all of these videos are linked. Linked in the description below, so you can go and watch these at your own leisure. I can't really show them to you because YouTube doesn't like explosions and obviously, seeing people get hit by IEDs and whatnot. Here we've got another video. The 80th Airborne Assault Brigade shares footage of destroying a Russian mechanized convoy including a Tiger armored vehicle and 3 BMPs near Oleshnia in the Kursk border area. Why I've included this one is because, okay, brilliant, some destroyed equipment from the Russians here, but actually this is in the Kursk area, so there's still activity going on up there. Still, as you can see, destruction of Russian materiel here. And then we have a mobile radar station, likely a P-15 Tropar belonging to Russian forces, struck by a drone in Russia's Kursk region again in late April 2025. Footage shows a moment of impact. The attack was carried out using a long-range strike drone, and you can see there that's a fairly sizable bit of kit, probably worth a pretty penny, hit by a drone. It's going to be fairly sensitive equipment, so that drone, even though there's not a complete destruction of that bit of kit, you can pretty much, I would assume that that's going to be, I don't know if it's terminal damage, but it's going to be some pretty significant damage being done there. Right. Talking of drones, the Institute for the Study of War, the American military think tank, has a useful little analysis. The Ukrainian and Russian forces' constant technological and tactical battlefield innovations continue to transform the character of warfare in Ukraine. A non-commissioned officer, an NCO, in a Ukrainian unmanned systems battalion likely operating in Chasiv Yar direction reported on the 27th that continuous technological innovations and battlefield adaptations have increasingly transformed the character of modern conventional warfare in Ukraine into a war that primarily features, quote, long-range remote combat over meeting engagements between infantry and armoured vehicles. The NCO noted the Ukrainian and Russian forces' intensifying drone usage has expanded the area of contested grey zones and kill zones at the forward edge of the battle area. The NCO noted that in 2024, contested grey zones were roughly 500 metres to 2 kilometres in depth. But more intense drone usage since then has expanded the grey zone up to 5 to 7 kilometres in some areas of the front line. So this is essentially, I reported on this before, whereby the grey zone has expanded, and there's been talk about this corridor of kind of a dead zone where you just can't move. If you move in that area, you're going to be hit by drones. And this is where that asymmetry that exists, where the Russians do not have the numbers of drones that the Ukrainians have. The Ukrainians have the advantage there and are hammering that advantage. And they need to continue with that asymmetry too, whereby that they control the skies with drones and they control the grey zone. And in order for the Russians to even get to the contact line, they've got to go through some degree of this area, and they're getting at the moment their mechanized columns destroyed before, sometimes 8 kilometers before they get to the contact line. So in some areas it's undoubtedly even more than 6 to 7 kilometers, but certainly this corridor, and this has actually been an explicit intention. We've heard this before, that the Ukrainians want to create this corridor right along the front lines that means that the enemy can't move, and of course then that saves their own soldiers. This is a way of fighting, substituting men with machines. Machines do not take 18 years to grow up, or 25 years really, in terms of Ukrainian army, to develop. A machine or to build. Like a human soldier requires 25 years and training. And therefore to replace them is pretty challenging. But for a machine, I don't know, you can build that in a week or whatever it is, and then it's going to cost you some money, but actually overall it's a lot cheaper than a soldier, and you can replace them much more easily. So you much rather use drones instead of people if at all possible. The NCO reported that Russian forces are improving and expanding their unmanned systems capabilities and emulating Ukrainian forces' tactics of using drones to intercept enemy drones and conduct remote mining. Ukrainian forces have successfully leveraged superior drone capabilities to defend critical sectors of the front line while also mitigating manpower and material constraints. That's exactly my point there. So they're mitigating the asymmetry that works in the Russians' advantage to the Russians' advantage, whereby they got more people than the Ukrainians to throw at the front line. Well, we've got more drones. And if we can stop your people from even getting to within shooting distance of our people, then that's good news. And we will attrit your people with our drones. Our attrition of your forces and material does not require the attrition of our people. We're not sending a unit, a platoon of people against that dugout, against that vehicle. We're sending drones against that dugout and against that vehicle. And if we lose them, these drones are $300, $400 a pop for the FPVs. Ukraine maintains over 100 brigades that must defend the front line, but within Ukraine and along Ukraine's international border with Russia, currently over 2,100 kilometers long, and significantly leverages drone capabilities in tandem with traditional capabilities to deny Russian attacks across the front line. Ukraine has demonstrated an ability to rapidly upscale domestic drone production. We're going to talk about this in a second, and foreign drone procurement that is conducive to defending the front line, as well as executing a sustained long-range strikes campaign targeting Russian critical energy and defense industrial facilities deep within Russian territory that disrupts and degrades the Russian military's production and logistics. Both Ukrainian and Russian forces have more regularly been using fiber optic drones to strike each other's frontline positions, and have successfully used first-person view drones to intercept larger reconnaissance drones over the past few months. Okay. Let's see some more information on that. So this is your wide, Euromad press talking about moving from 1.5, 2 kilometer grey zones to 6 to 7 kilometer grey zones. And we are hearing that 95% of the drones used on the front line, according to the Kyiv Independent, are now made in Ukraine, according to the Defense Ministry. We, quote, we have made a breakthrough in the unmanned systems sector. So they are churning out drones by the absolute ton at the moment in a way that Russia is unable to. We had a thread on that yesterday, I think it was, where they're just and the day before possibly, where they're just less able to produce as many drones and are not as reactive as the Ukrainians. Here, just talking about the shooting down of reconnaissance drones, 349 drones were shot down by only one single Ukrainian brigade in 6 months. The 3rd Assault Brigade shot down 220 and hit 28 enemy UAVs, so probably FPVs or strike drones. Riflemen on the battlefield also added down targets to the general list. So they're not only just taking down drones with other drone interceptor drones, but also taking down drones with shooting them down, or electronic warfare from below. But there you can see a mixture of, those are all Lancets, those ones with X-wings. So those are strike drones. That looks like a Zala, is it? Super Cam. So okay, that's a 3rd Assault Brigade, 6 months, 350 drones. Then we look at this. Wow. Okay. Rob Lee states that this is a list of the top 10 Ukrainian drone units in March, according to the Ministry of Digital Transformation's monthly scoring system. So what happens is they have a scoring system, and any Ukrainian drone unit can participate in a program. They can use the points that they earn to procure more drones or equipment. So the better ones do even better because they get more stuff and more equipment by being at the top of the leaderboard. But it's incentivizing these groups to do even more, do even better. And I think this can work, which they can request themselves. Now, it says here that you've got the top 10, 414th Magyar's Birds Drone Brigade. Of course, they're going to be up there. The second is the Spooz Alpha. Third, National Guard's Project Laser. Then we've got Unmanned Systems Forces 59th Assault Brigade, 3rd Assault Brigade that we just heard from. They're in 5th place. Then, all these different brigades and units and whatnot. These guys are now going to be having that friendly competition with each other. And I think that's just really good. Yeah, this is a dangerous environment. Yeah, it's going to be horrific and war is horrible. But to bring in some kind of regular performance management into that, I think is not a bad thing. And when you're drone operators, you're slightly safer than sitting in a dugout right on the contact line. Although it is still very dangerous. These are high value targets, drone operators and drone teams. But you're going to be sitting there knowing what you've done on a daily basis, then looking at the Telegram account of this other unit and thinking, damn it, they've done this. And then I'm sure you'll be motivated to do just a little bit more. I'm sure should we fly one more today? I'm really tired, I know, but they're pushing it, maybe pushing it and getting more, and then motivated to come up with other ideas of how can we get more of these points. Someone was saying that why is the Rarog unit not on the list? And, it's not a perfect mechanism, this. Rob Lee says it depends on the enemy situation. The point scoring system incentivizes targets like air defenses. And we could be wondering why there are more air defenses that have been taken out somewhat more recently. Why have there been so many artillery systems on the list? Well, it could be that they've been incentivized, these units, by having high points for artillery systems, so then they're all like taking these out, getting those points in. Rarog and the drone line units are responsible for portions of the front line, and their top priority is to prevent Russian advances. So Rarog might be not in a position, like apparently they are a decent drone unit, but they're not on the leaderboard because they're doing drones, hitting troops, individual troops and vehicles operating in maybe their area of the front line, rather than deeper stuff that might be something that's more prevalent elsewhere on the front line, right? So, but I think that's broadly a good idea. Let me know what you think. Right, moving on to distance strikes. Last night, only 6% of the drones managed to get through air defenses, so that was good. 100 sent through, and 47 were shot down, 47 stopped by electronic warfare. That's 94, 6 getting through. That's pretty good. We're getting back to that 5% margin, which I think is kind of where you want. 0% obviously of drones getting through, and we did have several days of that. That was not uncommon, 0%, but then we've got up to 20-25%. And in fact, yesterday's figures are now came out much later yesterday, after I did my video, and they were bad, right? So Ukrainian air defense shot down 40 drones. They suppressed 74 with electronic warfare. That's 114, but there were 166 drones. So that means there were 52 drones that got through yesterday. That is an absolute shocker. Now, I don't know, I didn't hear too much about battle damage assessment and things getting hit any more than any other day yesterday, but it could well be that those drones were hitting military targets, maybe air defense systems. It could have been a really bad day at the office for the Ukrainians 2 nights ago. That's the highest number of drones I've seen getting through since the beginning of the war. 52 drones, at least as far as I can remember. 52 drones. That's almost a third. It's just, that is a shocker. But last night, it's gone down to 6% with only 6 getting through. So 2 completely different nights there. Okay, what have we heard? So Romania says that last night a Russian drone crossed its border during the attack on Odessa. 2 Romanian, 2 Italian fighter jets took off, but this translated statement shows they did not shoot down any Russian attack drones. So no shoot downs there, but again going into Romanian airspace. Parts of Cherkasy were without gas after an attack yesterday. That was during the daytime. The governor said they shot down 15 Russian Shahed drones, but admits a gas utility facility was damaged. So that was 2 nights ago's strikes and the effects in the daytime, or strike in the daytime, not sure. But really from last night with 6 drones getting through, I'm not hearing anything. Nothing significant. Now, last night the Ukrainians were active, as I imagine they are every night. We just don't always hear about it. There were claims at the time that alerts in Kaluga region, Smolensk, Lipetsk, Tula, Saratov, Tambov, Ryazan, a lot of these places that quite regularly get targeted. We don't have too much evidence of what took place other than a massive explosion, and I don't think this is drones. The big claim is this is a long Neptune missile or 3. Major fires raging at an oil depot in Novorossiysk. So this is down the Black Sea, where the Russians have moved their Black Sea fleet. They moved them from Sevastopol in Crimea to Novorossiysk, and there is an oil depot there that's been targeted before. There's port infrastructure has been targeted before. Now, before the blaze, apparently Russian channels reported a missile threat mentioning a long-range Neptune. Locals also reported hearing 3 explosions. That is a serious fire taking place there. Probably video shows the aftermath of the Neptune anti-ship missile strike in the village of Kirillovka near Novorossiysk. Russian monitoring channels wrote about the missile threat and later wrote a Neptune was flying, and then this exploded. And there's lots of imagery of some big flames taking place in Novorossiysk. Now, also evidence that a chemical explosives plant was hit in Dzержинsk in Russia overnight, a site that has been targeted multiple times previously. So that's good news that the Ukrainians did that too. And then what else do we have? Kursk. There was evidence of drones flying in Kursk. Don't know of any damage done there, but there are several videos purporting to be concerning explosions in Kursk. And then we have explosions being heard in Russia's Nizhny Novgorod region. 2 loud blasts were recorded a minute apart during a drone alert. The one valuable target in Dzержинsk, where the explosions happened, is the Sverdlov plant. So that's what we were talking about. This is a manufacturer of high-powered explosives, oxygen and hexogen, which are the basis for most ammo. They also make artillery shells and aerial bombs. So that was something that was targeted last night. That was Nizhny Novgorod. And then we hear today that mass evacuations from all the schools in Nizhny Novgorod. I wonder whether the ammo plant there or something might be still under threat or maybe on fire or something. But you have got widespread evacuations of schools in Nizhny Novgorod. So something is amiss there. And now, right now, although this was like an hour and a half ago now, air raid sirens in occupied Crimea, all sea, ground, public transport has been halted due to drone and possibly Neptune missile strikes. Let's see if there's any other news. Yeah, so I can't find any more information about strikes last night. So we're going to move on to other bits and pieces. Euromaidan Press reports that Ukraine's defense intelligence states Russia is reinforcing Crimea amid fears of losing control. Russia is deploying more troops and military equipment to Crimea as it fears losing the territory it annexed in 2014, according to Ukraine's defense intelligence. This is fascinating. Now, if this is the case, I doubt Ukraine are going to be able to mount any kind of reasonable attack on Crimea, but that's really not the point. There are two elements to this that could be advantageous, and this is just me spitballing, right? One is if they pull loads of equipment from elsewhere to Crimea, then that is really concentrating that equipment in an area that actually they've got pretty good satellite and radar access to. So things like the UK's radar plane, the Rivet Joint, goes right up to Crimea regularly. It gets a good readout there, and they're going to get satellite imagery. They're going to know Ukraine. Ukraine gets hammered. Sorry, they're going to know Crimea. Crimea gets hammered routinely. Like every night for the last 3 nights, it's been absolutely shellacked by the looks of it, although we don't really hear about the successes there. They kind of emerge later, but they're bringing more and more stuff there because they're worrying about Crimea. Then the Ukraine is going to be brilliant, because actually assuming that they're not going to be really seriously entertaining the idea of attacking Crimea, then it's bring them on and we'll attrit them, bring them on and we'll attrit them, because then the second ramification of this is by taking those very important bits of kit, the material, away from elsewhere, you're weakening the elsewhere. So that then gives Ukraine the ability to either strike deeper into Russia because they've taken air defense units from there and here and over there, brought them to Crimea, or taken them from other areas of the front line and brought them to Crimea, or whether it's, soldiers, whatever material or resources they are moving to Ukraine. It really gives a concentrated kind of shooting fish in a barrel situation for that equipment, and then weakens elsewhere. So either way, that's good. In fact, as Max24 points out, this is Rebar. Long time since I've referred to Rebar. This is Russian propagandists and Vorenkos are scaring each other with an operation by the Ukrainians into Crimea or onto Crimea. So that is something they are worrying about. Well, yep, go for it. Worry away. Judging by radio intercept, Russian commanders at the front have received an ultimatum. Either they will storm the Dnipropetrovsk region by May the 9th, or they will be imprisoned, according to the Lieutenant of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Alex. So that's into the Dnipropetrovsk area. Well, actually, we're hearing that in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, their most eastern villages there are evacuating families as Russian troops close in, and that fits in line with exactly what we've just heard. The evacuation order concerns the villages of Kolona Mezhova, Novopridorodne, Raipole and Sokoreeva Balka, lying some 5 to 15 kilometers from the front line. These are areas that are somewhat close to the Andriivka, sort of Vuhledar corner of the front line there. Now, as I reported yesterday, Putin had suggested a ceasefire, 3-day ceasefire truce over the May victory parade, May the 9th victory parade. Zelensky said, now here's another attempt at manipulation. For some reason, everyone should wait for May the 8th and only then ceasefire to provide Putin with silence during the parade. We value human lives, not parades. And that's why we believe, the world believes, that there is no reason to wait for May the 8th. And the fire must cease, not for a few days, only to kill again. An immediate, complete and unconditional ceasefire, and for at least 30 days to be guaranteed and credible, is what can provide the basis for real diplomacy. So he's then kind of called Putin's bluff and said, you want 3 days? Rubbish. We're not doing 3 days. We want to do 30 days. And of course, that's exactly what the US would like as well, isn't it? So indeed, the US rhetoric has been pretty much in support of Ukraine's positioning there. Meloni, the Italian leader, says Italy stands with Ukraine in its fight for freedom. We support Trump's efforts and Zelensky's openness to an unconditional ceasefire, showing Ukraine's desire for peace. But Putin's 3-day ceasefire is insufficient. Real peace needs solid security guarantees. So they're behind a full sort of at least 30-day ceasefire. So this is really clever, I think, from Zelensky here. It's like 3 days, that's rubbish. You want to do 30 days, balls in your court, Russian. If you're not up for that, then it shows that you aren't really serious about peace. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has said that a 30-day ceasefire is impossible without settling key issues, but claims Russia is ready to begin talks without preconditions. He adds Russia seeks to move the war towards a peaceful resolution, but hasn't got an answer from Ukraine yet. So they're saying, kind of like trying to fudge it there, I think, and try and get away with saying no, 30-day ceasefire is, not acceptable for us at the moment. Now, Steve Rosenberg, the BBC correspondent in Moscow, says it doesn't sound like Russia's ready to end the war. One Russian paper today said, quote, a ceasefire doesn't mean we abandon our objectives anytime soon. It's possible North Korean troops will play a part in routing Ukraine's army. Plus, Sergei Lavrov's long list of conditions were also in the paper. And those conditions, of course, all those red lines I talked about yesterday, which is ridiculous conditions that Russia are trying to impose upon Ukraine in order to gain peace. And lots of people talking about North Korean troops as well. I don't know whether there is this idea that they might well be thrown into Ukraine. It'd be really interesting if that happens and what the answer would be from Western allied nations. Now, Noel Report says that there are calls from the US for elections in Ukraine as a condition for peace talks. Those calls have actually quietly disappeared from the official rhetoric, Radio Svoboda is claiming. Meanwhile, the EU and Ukrainian officials fear Trump could walk away from the Ukraine-Russia peace talks, citing slow progress as a reason to claim success. Now, this is doing the rounds. A lot of people saying that actually, Christopher Miller here for the Financial Times, European and Ukrainian officials fear Trump is on the brink of walking away from peace negotiations with Kyiv and Moscow, potentially using minor progress in talks as an excuse to say his job is done. Oh dear. Now, Emmanuel Macron has come out and said pressure on Russia will be increased in the next 8 to 10 days in the context of achieving peace in Ukraine. I don't know what he's talking about, what kind of pressure that would be, whether that's economic pressure or whether political pressure, and from whom, I just don't know. But Macron indicating there could be a change over the next 8 to 10 days. Now, he's also said he's got a planned meeting. Oh, no, that he didn't have a planned meeting with Trump in the Basilica in Rome, We talked for a couple of minutes in St. Peter's Basilica. I told him we need to be much tougher with the Russians. Then Zelensky arrived and we all had a discussion together. We called on Trump and Zelensky to resume a dialogue based on trust and discuss plans for the coming weeks, which they did. They removed the translator's chair because Zelensky preferred to speak in English. I told Trump again that we need to push Putin harder to ceasefire. Then we had another meeting with Zelensky. Our goal is for the Americans to come to Kiev as soon as possible to establish the conditions for a ceasefire. We must be prepared together with the Americans to increase our demands on Russia. That's really, really important. Sorry, as Blue Sky has its issues, I've had to go to Twitter. So he then continues, or Macron does, I think I have convinced the Americans that we need to increase threats and potentially sanctions to push the Russians to accept. In the next 8 to 10 days, we will increase the pressure on Russia, but I remain cautious because part of the equation depends on Moscow. Trump has listened a lot. He has envoys who are engaged in discussions on territories and security guarantees, but how will you discuss territories when you are being bombed? And that we talked about elements of what he said there over the last couple of days and just previously, obviously. Now, unfortunately, although, he says there are US envoys that are engaged in these discussions, yada, 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 we've got JD Vance and actually Mike Walsh just now coming out and saying really not useful things, right? So JD Vance is the Kiev Independent. Ukrainians aren't winning the war. Vance says peace deal is necessary, but not guaranteed. It's quote, sometimes you're incredibly frustrated with the Ukrainians. Sometimes you're incredibly frustrated with the Russians. He told the Charlie Kirk show. Ugh. The US team is making progress in the negotiations, he said, but a peace deal is not necessarily guaranteed. Quote, I can't say with 100% certainty, Charlie, that we're going to be able to do it. So that's interesting. That's the first time we've heard an element of skepticism there. Vance did not discuss the details of the proposed peace agreements, but said he believes Ukraine will not be able to defeat Russia militarily and take back its occupied territories by force, which, to be fair, is pretty accurate, I think. But I think you can do that if you have the platform of a massive economic war against Russia, and then that will lead them to, I think, capitulate militarily. If this doesn't stop, the Ukrainians aren't winning the war, Vance said. I think there's this weird idea among the mainstream media that if things go on for just another few years, the Russians will collapse and the Ukrainians will take their territory back. Yeah, I believe that, but I believe it's an economic collapse. And everything will go back to the way it was before the war. That's not the reality we live in. And he's obviously giving up any hope of this happening. This is a really pessimistic outlook. Vance said that if the war drags on, Russia and Ukraine would both face societal collapse, millions more lives could be lost, and the risk of nuclear war would escalate. It has to stop. It's the policy of the administration that this administration that it stops. Of course, the best way to have it stop without the loss of all those soldiers and the bombings is massive economic pressure on Russia. And that is what the US can do. Now, Mike Walsh has come out and said, quote, Ukraine was and remains one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Instead of trying to correct the president, Zelensky could have sat side by side with the president, signing a deal on minerals. So Zelensky shouldn't fact check the president. The president should be allowed to lie about Ukraine with impunity. This is what Mike Walsh is saying. President should be allowed to lie. And by the way, I'm going to lie too and say Ukraine is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. So assuming you got, I don't know, how many, 195 countries in the world? 200? So where would you put the most corrupt countries? Out of 200, where would you put them? Is halfway the most, one of the most corrupt? So if I said there was a league table, Premier Leagues, well done Liverpool, they just won the Premier League. But I look at the table, the Premier table, and I look at a club that's just in the middle of the table. What I say, that's one of the best teams in the Premier League. That's one of the best teams in the Premier League. That, yeah, but they're only halfway down. No, you can't say that. So you look at one of the worst teams are like the bottom 4 out of 20. One of the best teams, top 4 out of 20. That's what I'd say. So if he says one of the most corrupt countries in the world is Ukraine, and it sits pretty much in the middle, where does Ukraine sit on this table? Let's go down. So I think we get to about 105th is Ukraine. 105th most corrupt country in the world. It's been trying to go in the right direction. It's at war. It's really difficult. Russia, on the other hand, and bear in mind that freaking Mike Walsh, the prime dingbat, says nothing about Russia, which instead of 105th, Russia is right down here in 154th position. What he should have been saying is that Russia's probably one of the most corrupt countries in the world. But he doesn't. He has a go at Ukraine, the ally of the United States, or was the ally of the United States. I find that disgusting. I find that really unhelpful, and Mike Walsh should take a long walk off a short pier. Do one, mate. Do one. Yeah. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you so much for all of your support. Thanks for your patience today. Blue Sky's still going a bit nuts. So that made it a bit of a delay for me. Please remember that we are still doing the Car for Ukraine fundraising campaign, and we're in 4th position at the moment. We're looking to get to 2 vehicles worth of support. That would be amazing. Thank you to those who have helped. You can get yourself patches and badges and whatnot. I really appreciate Donald Henderson and Jod Diesfeld and someone else without a name there for their contributions today and yesterday, as well as Javier Alvarez, Brian Vaughan the day before, and whatnot, Emil Grau as well. So thank you very much to all of those who have helped. Everyone on this donor wall, this list, really appreciate that. If you have the wherewithal, the desire, please help this campaign. Car for Ukraine are amazing. The link to this is below at atpgeo.com/donate. That will send you to this page, and make sure you're on the ATP Geopolitics page, and that will be attributed to our campaign. Really appreciate all of you who have supported, and if you can't afford to do so, please spread the word and spread the link. That would be amazing. In the meantime, take care, guys. Hopefully this was of use and informative, and I appreciate your feedback. Toodle pips.